Welcome. You are listening to Humans of Mitti Ke Rang, and today we are in conversation with Ms. Javita Nauth from Guyana. She is a social worker, mental health advocate, and a former Global Youth Ambassador at their world. Tune in to know more about her life and journey so far.
So much, Angela, and a big shout out to you guys and the amazing team at Mitti Ke Rang. Special shout out to Amit. I am so happy to be here, and I hope that we can have more meaningful conversations.
We hope so too. And should we get to the question?
Yeah, sure.
Great. So Javita, please tell us, was it always in your plan to be a social worker?
Yes and no. So yes, because I was actually doing it at the age of 12, but I just didn't know what it was. And no, because I kind of actually had fall into that black and white type of thinking that you are either going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a scientist, and never really tried to expand my thinking and explore, like, there's so many other possibilities that you could be. But yeah, at the age of 12, I was like completely doing things in terms of a social capacity, a social worker role, that I wasn't even aware of that's what it was called until I started my professional career. I was like, oh, so that's what that is.
Right. So you have also been a mental health advocate for almost 8 years now. So please tell us more about how did you actually start and what has been your journey so far?
Well, my journey as a mental health advocate really started, like I said, at a really early age, and I didn't know what it was. I actually had, a very traumatic life experience. It started at the age of 12, where, I had first experienced the death of my baby brother at the age of 12. I was a kid. I really didn't know really what all these intense emotion was, and all the pain and all of the emotion that comes, that sometimes is too complex to even understand at such a tender age. And I didn't really know how to deal with that. And imagine adults don't know how to deal with that. What could a kid process and think? At that point, when I was trying to understand all of that, I just did the most basic thing that I thought was possible to survive, like just try to block any type of situations that would have caused pain, anything that would have led to a feeling of loss. And that affected me in a lot of ways in my personal life, my professional life, because you're just trying to avoid situations that cause pain. But on the flip side, it is only through pain that you transform. And really, that was my initiation at that age, and I really started to gravitate towards questions of why do those things happen, and how do we really navigate in a healthy way, cope in a healthy way, and that really attracted me to that type of path and thinking, and my work really evolved organically from that personal experience. Because it affected my mental health. And I grew up in a very cultured society where talking about one's mental health was very taboo, especially in South Asian, Desi communities, Indo-Caribbean communities. It's very, you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to be put into the box or the thinking, oh, this is the crazy one, or, you use the word very loosely. Type of thinking, and it's quite important to recognize throughout my journey as a young professional that we need to be having this conversation at a very early age, that just as the way we're talking about, it's important to go to our doctors to get our physical checkup. We need to be checking in mentally with a therapist, a social worker, even trusted friends, loved ones who you have a safe space with, just to check in mentally. Because what we've learned is that if we're not mentally in a safe and healthy space, how can we even do anything? Can you even think of a time when you were just not in your mental space? How productive were you? Right? You didn't get anything done. Right? Yeah, so that really
You don't feel
understand.
getting out of your bed.
Yeah, right, exactly. You don't even want to get out of bed sometimes, and and that's important to reflect on the thoughts, because our thoughts, whether they're healthy or negative, really shape how we think, and then how we speak, and then how we interact with people. So if we're in a state of mind just because of an external event, something traumatic happened, or things that you could not control, and we don't check, and we don't reflect, or we don't have that space to provide that space for ourselves to process, how do we even know to go about doing our activities? We're really kind of running from it, and that catches up with you. That definitely catches up with you. You need to be able to face yourself first, because you will recognize that you are your own obstacle in terms of everything that you want to achieve and everything that you want to do. So really sitting with yourself in a safe space that is kind, because we are harshest critic. We are our judge, our executioner, our jailer, everything. And recognizing that you need to be more kinder to yourself first. And that really opens up a forum to you to be really in a more receptive, reflective place, and more forgiving of yourself. And that really is what kind of pushed me into that type of work, because I was always attracted to how can we work with this? How can we work through this? And I've had the opportunity to work in a capacity where I work with marginalized communities, persons of color, LGBTQ youth, persons who are first-generation immigrants coming to America, persons who were also, they had severe trauma of incidents of maybe rape or domestic violence. And how do we work with that in a space that is so healthy that they can actually rehabilitate themselves? And especially for women, I think, just me being a person of color, a woman, a first-generation immigrant, it's very important for me to be able to take care of my own mental health. So how can I be able to take care of someone else if I can't take care of myself first? So that's really what kind of directed me and led me to do my work and really fall in love with it, because it's a process. It's not something that you just wake up one day and say you do, and it's not always peaches and rainbows every day. It tries you. It definitely pushes you. There's a lot of obstacles and challenges. But yeah, I've had the opportunity where we were able to challenge youth to think about what mental health means to them. We were able to, we were invited, actually, my team and I, to actually speak at a youth chat series on bullying, complicit violence in the face of indignity. And I had the opportunity to really talk about the bystander culture. I mean, when we see people get bullied, because I suffered from bullying when I first migrated from Guyana to here, because of my accent and my culture, and you're very brand new to the American Western ways, and plus you were smart, it was a threat. I didn't know that. I was a threat to a lot of people, and I suffered from that, and I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to verbalize it, and I internalized that type of trauma, and it affected me. And I was depressed. I would go home crying, and I didn't want to talk to my parents, because it's so, you're a teenager and you're like, you don't want to talk to them about that. You just want to have your space, or at least a safety place where you can have an understanding with someone and they can help to navigate you. And that didn't know that I was actually building the bridge as I was actually walking it, and I was able to talk about that challenge youth to really take a stand when they see people being bullied, because it's not the type of thing that you would want to do for yourself. So why do you do it? And that being complicit and being a bystander is very much the same as doing the act itself. You know, there are so many different types of things that's happening in the world. And really changing our own mindset is the first place to start, because it always starts from home, right? And that was important conversation to be having with youths, and being able to talk about something in a safe space and be able to advocate for it. So some things that have happened to you, really coming out of that mentality of, I don't have a voice, I don't have a reason to share this, or I'm too embarrassed, or it's shameful. When it's appropriate, and if you know it can be able to help in creating more awareness, giving voice to people who may not feel, it allows for you to open that up. And in that way, it opens up a space inside of your ability to show that, okay, maybe not all my sufferings or all my traumas is bad. You can be able to have a platform to talk about those things. And I was very happy to talk about that, and how youth especially need to charge themselves about moving away from that bystander culture to being an upstander. I also had the really good opportunity to present our very first mental health workshop at the United Nations 61st Commission on Status of Women Youth Forum.
Wow.
It's an amazing experience. My very first time taking a workshop with my dear friend Perfula. And, you know, it was amazing because, you know, mental health is not something that we talk about openly. We talk about the word very loosely, but do we really understand what it is? And, you know, I've taken up, I've challenged myself to understand the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and I personally feel that I can be able to commit to, you know, making a positive change on SDGs 3, 4, and 5. And, you know, for our audience who don't know that, it's really health and well-being, and there's an emphasis on mental health, because it's important to be able to understand that how important mental health is in the conversation of your overall health. And since very big advocate for education, quality education, it seemed very natural that, you know, that's something that I was able to do. And gender parity, just because being a woman is so beautiful and important, and it's so empowering, and I think women should own that. There's a power when you own who you are and all essence of it, and then you give other women permission to be themselves, and that's beautiful, you know. And being able to have that platform on such a large international scale to talk about the importance of women, young women, and their mental health, and how that directly relates to the economic productivity of a family, of a community, of a country, nation states, larger scales. Because, you know, research studies have shown that when we invest in the girl child, it's dividends. You're really securing your future. And imagine on a larger scale of a country, you know, you are investing your future there, and securing it. And, you know, can you imagine all the women in the world, if they're able to move, or at least embody the potential and capacities that they can do? We wouldn't be having wars, you know, we wouldn't be having all different, you know, bickering, and I mean, there are internal conflicts. We wouldn't be even having these type of discussions, you know. It would have more of a negotiation, caring for what families think about. We wouldn't be so polarized. We wouldn't be so sexist as a country, as a society, you know. And really kind of having that type of conversation on a large scale, you know, talking about the need for countries and societies and government agencies, your local job agencies, having conversations how investing in the mental health of their employees is very important. Like, you know, people take off sick days. Why can't you have a mental health day just to check in with yourself, you know? And how to when women are empowered. I know Mitti Ke Rang works with widows and young women and children, really to empower them, and you guys are doing an amazing job. You're fundraising now for them, and I applaud you for that. I think we need to do more in terms of recognizing how important it is to invest. You need to put the money with women in terms of empowering them, educating them, so we're securing ourselves financially, economically, not just for ourselves, but for our family, because women think on a whole large collective mindset. They think about taking care of their husband, taking care of the family, taking care of the children, making sure food's on the table, and multitasking. If we can do that, why can't we run governments? Why can't we run nations? It's a no-brainer for me. And to be able to have that conversation and to really have women be acknowledged that they have experienced trauma, they have experienced a lot of hardship, a lot of obstacles in their journey, whatever that shape, form looks like for them, and that their voice is very much needed. And when opportunity is not there, they need to create their own. One of the biggest things that I've learned navigating and really launching my own professional career is that if you don't have a seat at the table, you make your own chair. You take whatever you need to be having in that conversation.
Right.
You need to charge yourself with the responsibility that your voice is equally as important as everyone else. And we need to come out of that inferiority complex that, we're not so important. Oh, they know better than us. No, even the littlest person has something important. I forget who says it. I think it was the Dalai Lama said it, that you don't know the power of something small because or something to the effect that maybe you haven't met a mosquito in the net or something like that. It was something to that effect. But it showed it showed the effect of how small something is can have a mighty effect on something bigger, right? But yeah, I've had that opportunity, and I'm currently a second-year student at Columbia School of Social Work. And I am going into my final year. I'm going to be graduating with my social work degree. It just felt right because this was something that I naturally was doing at such an early age, and I've had a reference point because of something so traumatic had happened to me, and that I just didn't know how to deal with it. And I felt that I was one little part of something larger than myself, and coming out of that mindset, and it just flowed naturally. It just grew from there.
Right. And I think it's kind of a good coincidence that we have you as a guest speaker today, is because as you said, the Desi community is not, even though they're aware of mental health as an issue, they don't really like to address it. Because just today we got news that a very reputed Bollywood actor, we lost him to depression and suicide. And it was so heartbreaking for everyone, and no one knows why. But
who was the Bollywood?
It happened. Sushant Singh Rajput.
Ah, okay. I love Bollywood. I'm a Bollywood buff. Like, we grew up with Bollywood movies. That was like our bridge to our Indian roots, our Indian culture. That's my grandfather loved Shashi Kapoor, Lata Mangeshkar. That was the vibe when I grew up. That was the type of music in the household. And I know, it's quite sad. We've had to see these type of things play out before we understand the issue behind it, right?
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the culture and the mindset that we shouldn't be talking about that, because when that happened to me when I was 12 years old, I was just overwhelmed with hurt, rage, anger was the thing I remember the most. Why is this happening? All of this. And there's the immediate feeling to suppress it, to push it away, to kind of block it because it's so much. And at one point that is healthy, because sometimes you need to compartmentalize things before we can be able to dissect them. But then it becomes toxic, or it becomes unhealthy when we no longer address it and ignore it, and it becomes the elephant in the room, or that becomes something that we know it's there but no one wants to talk about it. And for each culture is very different, but I grew up in a very conservative, and I wouldn't say too conservative, I would say open Hindu community, Hindu household, and we never had conversations about that. A lot of major things happened, but we just didn't know how to talk and communicate about it. And we really need to start there. That's where the issue is, having conversations, especially with our older folks who sometimes may not feel comfortable with that. How do we do that? How do we bridge with the young folks and the older folks? How do we build that conversation? And from a very early age, I don't know when I remember, but it was just, I was always gravitated, or I was always the mediator. I was like, okay, wait, let's stop. Let's kind of see what could be going on. I was always trying to have that objective lens, and talk about things. And now it's become so second nature for us in our family that I was very happy to have created that, when there's something going on, or there's some type of issue or whatever, we have that open conversation to talk about it. But that's something that we need to be having. I mean, my culture, my understanding is that, we don't want to be assumed that we're crazy. We don't want to be that, we're going to be going into a mental asylum kind of thing. I don't know why that thinking is there, but it's just that it's important when we talk about our feelings. It's just a strong of emotion too, because unequivalent feeling, hard emotions versus soft emotions, and talk about your feelings makes you feel weak. But there's power in vulnerability. It allows for you to really kind of understand why you do the things you do, and it allows you to break those toxic patterns, because if we're not talking about situations like suicide, we're not talking about situations like depression, we're not talking about situations about baby blues. A lot of moms suffer from that, right after giving birth. And we're not talking about death in the family, especially for children. We're not talking about all those things. How are we going to even navigate conversations later on, remember? And we're bringing up young boys and girls into this world that are completely unprepared for adult life, right? Young boys are going into relationships, going on to marry, going on to whatever they're doing, and they're just unprepared. And that's how we kind of put into context of why people do things, how tension come about, relationships and stuff like that. And we're not addressing the communication, the breakdown of communication. And it's interesting because I know every family is different, but what worked for myself and my family, it was just recognizing that sometimes it's emotion, it's a lot of emotion, but having the conversation is very important. It may be really hard, it may be really discomforting, it may cause a lot of tension, a lot of shouting, but sometimes having it is a start, and that's progress. It's not the actual destination, it's the progress, it's the little steps, because little steps towards that is big progress too. Little steps are big steps too. And having the thought, just having the conversation, just having your kids know that they can come to you to talk about things, and vice versa too, because I grew up thinking, or always grew up with the idea that elders, they know best, everything that they say is correct, but that's not necessarily true. You have to learn that you need to question those things, question everything, question even what I'm saying to you, right? that's the type of mindset we need to be cultivating in our young people. That's something that we need to relearn as well too. That young people can be teaching our parents, can be teaching the older generation, and it should be a flow. It should be a give or take, because the young people have the youth, the strength, but we lack the wisdom, right? The experiences, and that's something that they can offer us, right? And we have to also recognize that our families, our elders are also a product of their time, and history becomes very important there, that we need to understand our history properly so we don't continue repeating those same things. And that's on a micro level, and it applies to a macro level as well. But conversations start, and I love Deepika Padukone. So I know she's a very prominent activist. So she talks about her depression.
Right.
She talks a lot about how that affected her, and I think that's very important. She's changing the culture. She's changing the culture for young people in India, not just Indian, worldwide. Whoever is following her, it doesn't have to be just an Indian audience. It has have to be an audience who believe mental health is important, and that's important, And you don't have to be a celebrity to do that too. You just can be a regular person like me and you, and having small conversations and checking in, especially during the pandemic, COVID. We've seen how it's been really crazy, especially here in New York City. We've been the epicenter, and we're slowly recovering now and slowly kind of opening back up. But you've been seeing really large cases of domestic violence, because women, and not just women, men too, and children are forced in close proximity with their abusers. You're seeing increased suicide too, because people are stressed at how they're going to put bread on the table, where they're working, because they get laid off from their jobs. And these are conversations and real things that we need to be looking and talking about, and having. But it really comes with having the conversation at home with your kids, and with kids, with parents, and having that there. Hopefully we have more of that. We create more of that.
Hopefully. So if anybody is dealing with such sort of issue, maybe anxiety or depression, and what would you suggest them to do? What are some words of advice you would like to give them?
That's a very great question. I'm happy you asked, because we think that mental health is so completely out of our physical health. And when we look at the things that we're doing every day, we're already incorporating tools to take care of our health. Whether that's going to bed early and resting, having your body rejuvenated with a good night's sleep, 8 hours sleep, not the 1-2 hours sleep. Eating healthy is very important, because we're sometimes, especially I know with me in COVID-19, I've been so obsessed that I'm gaining weight. I feel like I've completely gained weight. But the idea is just taking more conscious effort into understanding how you're eating, what you're digesting. That's also taking care of yourself. If people are artists and they like to do creative venues, they'd like to do creative activities, they can use art in terms of drawing, writing, making music, making beats. That's definitely a tool that they can use. I know some people are very athletic. They like to jog, they like to run, they like to do yoga. I myself like to practice a little yoga as well. That's also tools that I use. These are little tools that you could do every day in your life. And for some folks who may require more intensive care, maybe connecting with a therapist, a psychiatrist, is always very helpful. But it really is important to be open with yourself, that sometimes those things are able to help certain people, and then certain people are a little bit more in need of support of additional tools. Recognize where you fall on that spectrum. But there are lots of little things that you could do, making sure that you put down personal boundaries for yourself, to take care mentally, to rest, because sometimes, all the things that we do in our life is so exhausting. So whatever it is that you like, whatever it is that you naturally like to do, find that, do it, and put time into that. That's my best advice right now. And as things open up, I know in India things are still in lockdown mode. You can find a lot of things. I know people are very much into art and music. A lot of my friends, they love to watch their Bollywood movies, and I myself like to catch up on some of my movies on Netflix. But that's also a forum, calling someone, talking, because we are social beings, we are humans, we need to have that, that social connection. Talking to someone, persons who are, trusted, you can be able to share in a safe space. That's important. And those are the tools that I would share, and I would suggest that we recognize, because we have them at our disposal. It's not something that you have to go out and buy. We have it right there, and just recognizing how to use it.
Right. Moving on from mental health, you were a youth volunteer at Their World, and so please tell us more about Their World and your contribution there.
Yeah, so I was a global youth ambassador with Their World. It's a charity organization based in the UK. I worked primarily on SDG 4 quality education, especially for children in marginalized communities. I worked on the early childhood education campaign. I did a lot of advocacy work with them in the form of really trying to bring awareness and light on the issue that we need to be funding early childhood education to invest in children so they can actually make it into the important stages of their growth, right? If children are not having the proper nutrition to grow up, to be a kid, important tools, the basic essentials in the classroom, how are they even going to make it to the next level? Those are the really basic foundations. And that charging different countries, and especially countries where we have really marginalized communities of children, primarily like Syria, the Rohingya population as well too. It's very important to recognize, what is your social responsibility for that, and charging member states to up their game, put a 10% benchmark of the state funds to go towards that. And that was very important, because I really believe that children are the future, and that we need to be nourishing them mentally, physically, so they can be able to grow up and be all the change makers, entrepreneurs, artists, social workers, whatever they meant to be. So that was a really important role that I've had, and I was blessed to have grown and learned and meet a lot of influential people who have had impacts on myself, and who I hope have had some sort of impact on them as well too, to be able to highlight that issue.
Absolutely. You also worked in an organization called Gather for Good Incorporation.
Yes,
right?
Gather for Good.
Gather
for Good is actually a love child that my dear sister friend Priscilla Dyer created. It's a grassroots initiative, and really the idea, the concept that behind Gather for Good was to partner up with grassroots initiatives to help them achieve their goal. I worked with them with the tabling and the panel discussions for the 2014 Pieces of Lifestyle. We really had conversation around what is our understanding of racism, what is injustice of the criminal justice system, and how we can change that dialogue to be more inclusive. And the conversation around Pieces of Lifestyle is not just chanting and wanting peace and having peaceful protest, but actually embodying that. And we've seen, guys probably have seen nationwide on the news that the George Floyd case how that has like been the last straw to break the camel back in this whole massive protest that we've been seeing going on, not just in New York, in other places as well, to other countries, that talks about that, and Gather for Good really tries to cultivate a culture of compassion. I've been part of the project that worked with helping to promote self-care for caregivers, and we went to Little Corn Island in Nicaragua, and we were able to take that time to embody self-care for social workers, activists, people who are just completely serving the community, to recognize they need to be able to recharge and take care of themselves so they can come back strong and recharged to be able to do their work. And recognizing that and holding a space and holding a group, a session for that. And I was also part of the Harlem Flow as well, the Sacred Warrior Harlem Flow, where we practiced yoga, we practiced self-care in that form. And it's been a privilege to still have such a strong connection with Priscilla and be able to be a part of that. But they're doing amazing work, and I'm very happy to be a part in association with them.
They're doing amazing work, that's true. So my next question to you is, do you have an inspiration when it comes to your work, something that just keeps you going and assures you that you're on the right path?
That's a really good question. Yes, I do. My inspiration really is my family. That has really been my reference point, just because I've had so many transformation as a child into young adult and into adulthood, that I've actually just learned from my own experiences, and that has been one of the richest things. Sometimes we try to search outside when it's right here in our own self, in our family, and that has been the biggest inspiration for me. Just recognizing that it always has been at home.
Absolutely. You had moving on from all the work you've done, all the amazing work you've done. Now some general questions. So you had a trip to India last year.
Yes,
yes. Please share your experience.
So for those who don't know, and for our audience, I was born in Guyana, and I migrated with my family when I was about 10, 11 years old to the States. And to understand my roots and heritage, it's been a lifelong goal to travel to India, because Guyana is a beautiful country, rich, diverse country, predominantly of all different race: Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, Chinese Guyanese. The list goes on. And I came across a program called the No India Program, KIP. Through my dad, actually, and he told me about this program, and I applied to it. And the program was primarily for Indian youths, or youths who were from who had Indian heritage and had never been to India. So I applied, and I was actually accepted into the program. And I visited India in 2019, last year, the very first time. And it was just amazing, because I've always been in love with India, the idea of India, the history of India, just because it's so enriched in our heritage and our culture, my heritage and my culture. And I wanted to know more, because I didn't really know much about my history. And one of the biggest things that we have to recognize is of mankind, or the hubris of men or women, is that when you don't know your history, you will repeat it, and the mistakes as well.
Right.
So I've had the beautiful and fortunate opportunity to have traveled to India. I traveled to New Delhi, Gujarat, and Varanasi, and it was mind-blowing. I am definitely coming back to visit. South India is on my bucket list goals. And it was amazing. I was able to learn about the culture, learn about the history, I was invited to the Foreign Service Institute in New Delhi. We got to meet former ambassadors. We got to do sightseeing. The first time visiting the Taj Mahal, amazing. The food, the cuisine was really nice, and learning more about where my ancestors came from was deeply personal for me. And the fact that I always remember growing up with my Aja and sitting on his lap and watching Gandhi and the Peace March. Would never let me go away and watching the Ramayana on Sunday mornings. That was his thing, and that was part of just my childhood, and remembering that that was meaningful and important for him, and it was something that I wanted to do in honor of him and just for myself as well. And it was amazing. It was beautiful. We connected with so many different youths who were also from the Indian diaspora and have an ancestry. I have amazing friends and colleagues from Fiji, Mauritius, South Africa, who we connected on that trip, and we still have an amazing relationship, and we still stay connected. Attending a few of our friends' upcoming weddings. Hope no more COVIDs, and it was wonderful. And yeah, it was a life-changing experience for me in the fact that I was able to experience that, to experience culture and know more about my heritage and my ancestral roots.
Wow. So coming up to your country, as in the country that you were born in, Guyana. So if you could tell our Indian viewers more about Guyana and what you think is the beauty of that country, and if you want, you can share something about USA as well, since that's the country you have been raised in for the most of your life. So please share with us that.
Sure. Well, thanks so much. I think that's a very beautiful question. To understand Guyana, it really is to understand the history of Guyana. I left when I was 12 years old, so I can speak from that time frame. Guyana was part of the British Empire. It gained its independence in 1966. And really to understand the culture and the roots really is to understand how Indians came to Guyana. They were taken as indentured laborers to work on the islands. Guyana is geographically in South America. We border Venezuela, Brazil, Suriname, and the Atlantic Ocean. But for every Guyanese, we're very much part of the Caribbean culture. We have Afro-Guyanese, Afro-Indian, Guyanese Chinese. We have Amerindians. It's been a very beautiful combination of diversity. I think that's one of the beauty strengths, and it plays out in our food. And even though I grew up eating dal and rice and bhaji, I still was having pepper pot on Christmas time. And a pepper pot is actually a traditional dinner that we normally have, and it's a traditional dish prepared by locals or Amerindians. It's an Amerindian dish, and that's been really my childhood memory in terms of remembering all those beautiful things. I remember Christmas time, we would celebrate Christmas and have traditional pepper pot and sorrel and mabi. And then Easter time, we would celebrate Easter. I grew up in a Catholic school. I went to Catholic school as well, and my mom's side of the family is Muslim, so we celebrated Ramadan as well. So it was a very beautiful combination of diversity and culture. And I invite you all to come and learn and know more about it. And some really good books or resources that you can reference is Gayatri Bao there. She talked a lot about indentured servitude and how Indians came from India to the islands to work there. Basdeo Mangu, V.S. Naipal, he writes a lot about that. These are some really nice resources that you guys can reference to learn more about it. But Guyana is beautiful. The culture, the food. We have chutney and soca music. You know, it's uniquely different, but very much hints of the history in the ethnicity, the food. You know, we have certain words that we use that is completely directly to the Bhojpuri language, you know, and we've had instruments that we use, the harmonium, that's completely like in direct link to certain parts in India as well too, right? And that's how actually you can actually learn how they came, you know. We recently celebrated May 5th, the indentured day, where a lot of the Indians who were shipped from India came to work on the plantations in Guyana. So that was a day. It is a little bit controversial because some folks think that it's a sad day to remember, but some people rejoice in it because it was a life. They were starting all over again. But yeah, but it's a beautiful country, food-wise, culture-wise, music-wise, very natural. There's so many different actual wildlife there too. The Amazonia actually connects into Guyana, and you can actually see it on some of the travel channels that they've been there. Gordon Ramsay, the famous chef, was actually in Guyana recently. Yeah, so you know, it's beautiful, and I do invite you all to join and to learn more about it.
Definitely, most definitely. So before, so if you had to share your experience and guide other people who would want to get into the social work sector sooner or later, what would you say to them?
That's a good question. The first rule is to remember that you are your first client. You are your first patient. You know, we are social workers, or the persons who are in the social service field have this innate ability to always want to help, always want to give, always want to move mountains, and that is beautiful. But we need to recognize that we need to be our first client, and what I mean is that you need to recognize your limitations, recognize how much you can give, recognize the places where you need to stop and rest and rejuvenate. And that's very, very important, because what we see in our profession is a lot of burnouts. A lot of people with good intentions want to do big things, but they don't pace themselves and they burn out very quickly. So that's very important to recognize that, knowing that when you need to take a break and when you need to rest and do it, whatever it is that you like, that's personally on your time and not work related. That needs to be very important. You need to be very honest with yourself, because some people are workaholics. Some people just completely feel like they can bring that, and compartmentalizing that, remembering that personal time, family time, work time, you need to put that into the priority, and to not dilute it with the other things, because that can take away from your own mental space of being able to do. And recognizing that the biggest thing is really to recognize what your limitations and how much you can take, and making time for yourself.
Right. Really well said, and I hope people actually follow this. Unfortunately, with that, I've come to my last question.
Aww.
So, Javita, please share with our viewers about how they can get in touch with you, know more about you and your work.
Absolutely. I'm very social media friendly. I'm on Facebook. My handle is Javita Nauth. I'm on Instagram, Javita Indra. I'm on Twitter, Javita Nauth. I'm on LinkedIn. I have so many, sometimes I can't remember. I'm on LinkedIn. You can check me out. On WhatsApp. I'm a travel junkie. I love learning about culture, so I'm always very open to just having conversations and hearing and learning about projects that are working in terms of empowering young women and empowering youths to, you know, embody the best that they can be and be change makers in society. So feel free to give me a shout, and I look forward to connecting with you all.
We look forward as well. Javita, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such an easy conversation, such a pleasure talking to you. Some of the things you said, I really hope. Sorry?
It was a pleasure talking with you too, Angela.
Thank you so much. Also, some of the things that you said, I think they should really stick with us. Hopefully, the right people hear this interview and it reaches the right ears. So, thank you so much again for giving us your time, and yeah, have a good day.
You're very welcome. It's still 11 o'clock in the morning here, so my day's just begun. Well,
That's why. Have a good day.
All right. Take care. Bye.